Thick, fluid, fast and slow drying mediums, thinners, retarders, extenders. Artists have so many options. There's no shortage of choice among brands and it can be quite overwhelming. So let's focus our attention by adjusting a single property. How can we effectively adjust the thickness or thinness of our paints? Hi, I'm Lee and welcome to my studio and channel where I discuss tips, tricks, and techniques for oil and acrylic painters. Let's take a look at a few options available to artists when adjusting the thickness or thinness of our paints.
So I think the best way to talk about our mediums is to talk about them in parallel between acrylic and oil. Our oils, I'm going to put over here. So anytime I'm discussing oils, it'll be over on this section. Anytime I'm talking about acrylic, I'll put it over here. And I will have parallels between both of these so you can see exactly what is happening between both oil and acrylics. Before we start talking about mediums, let's talk about what our paints are actually made of, or what is it we're trying to alter. So for, again, generally speaking, in oil paint, it's bound in refined linseed oil. So here's a big jug of it. For acrylic, it's bound in a acrylic polymer. Acrylic polymer can be in many different viscosities, but we'll get into that in a minute. So again, my oil over here, my acrylic over here. And how do we get our paints in these? Well, what we do is we take a pigment. In this case, I'm using lapis lazuli. Now this is an actual chunk of lapis. Still has all the impurities in it. You have some pyrite. You have a little bit of other impurities. I'll take a little spray bottle real quick. So we can kind of get some of that nice, beautiful ultramarine blue. There we go. And what we do, what happens is this is ground up and broken up, and the impurities are removed, and what we are left with is just the raw pigment. In this case, ultramarine. What we do is we take that pure pigment, and it's milled or mixed up into for acrylic. Oil. We typically just refine linseed oil, and that's how we get our oil paint. And then for acrylic, we bind it in our acrylic matte medium, or acrylic medium. And that's essentially a ballpark of just how these things are made. So a quick reminder, oil over here, acrylic over here. Let's discuss what's not a medium. That is Gamsol for our oil paint, or turpentine, and H2O for our acrylics. Now, what these are, they're called solvents. Solvents actually dissolve our mediums, and that can be okay in the beginning of our painting, but as we get toward the end of the painting, we don't want to begin using solvents. And in fact, I'd probably steer clear of these unless you're actually cleaning a palette or some palette knives. It's great for cleaning palettes and palette knives. Basically, these are, use these sparingly, essentially. These are not mediums or solvents because it actually dissolves our linseed oil and dissolves our acrylic matte medium, and that may not be beneficial for the longevity of our paintings. So try to stay away from these while painting if possible. Okay, so we have our paint. What do we now? We want to do something with it. A lot of times, what we want to do is just simply add some medium back into it. Maybe we want to extend it a little bit, or maybe to make it a little looser. That's one of the things that you do, and that's just a quick, easy. You want to again use. You can get away with it a lot more with acrylic than with refined linseed oil. If you put too much linseed oil, it'll take forever to dry. So let's say that we want to go thinner with our paints. So first thing we want to do is with oil, you could use something called Liquin Fine Detail. Liquid Fine Detail, it has an alkyd in it, so this will help it dry faster as well. But this has, as you can see, it has quite a bit of looseness to it, very low viscosity. It does have a bit of a smell to it, so if you don't want to use Liquid Fine Detail, consider using solvent-free fluid by Gamblin. Again, it's an alkyd, so it helps it dry a little bit faster, but it's very low viscosity. Very low viscosity. So those are two things that I would suggest. Here, so I'll put this right here. liquid fine detail, or if you want to keep it solvent-free, keep it in a solvent-free workflow, do it that way. Now, for our acrylic side, don't use water. What I would recommend is using fluid matte medium. Again, it's a very I use quite a bit of it, actually. That's the reason why I have such a big jar. I actually just got a new one. This fluid matte medium is great because it maintains the acrylic polymer without diluting it like what you would use with water. So there's that. And then if you want to go even thinner, consider airbrush medium. Airbrush medium is it's basically like skim milk. And again, it's still acrylic polymer. It's the same stuff as this, just at a much higher viscosity. So if you're wanting to go thin in oils, consider liquid fine detail or solvent-free Gamblin fluid medium. If you want to go fluid in acrylic, consider going fluid matte medium or airbrush medium. All right, so now let's go opposite. Let's say we want to go thick. In that case, consider using, again, Liquin Impasto medium. It is kind of a really thick, and we'll go through all these. I'll do demos of this here in just a second. Look how this comes in a tube. You get smaller tubes or big tubes depending on how much you need. A little bit goes a long way, and it really thickens up. Again, it does have a bit of a smell to it, so you want to use it in a well-ventilated area, or in the case of that, or if you don't want to do that, use solvent gel. Again, Gamblin makes a solvent-free gel for in case you don't want to have all the fumes and whatnot. And again, it's almost as thick as the Liquin Impasto. And again, I'll show you here that in a minute. And for our acrylic side, if you want to do, I would suggest gel matte medium, and this stuff is really thick. I mean, it's they're not joking when it says very thick, and again, I'll show you in here in a second. But if you want something with a little more texture, consider fiber paste by Gloden. Gloden's fiber paste, and this will give you that sort of impasto, real thick vibe. So if you need to go thick, I would consider again Liquin Impasto for oil or solvent-free gel. For acrylic, I would suggest a heavy, extra heavy gel matte, or with a fiber paste. Something else you can do is with just some cardboard, is you can try and get some of that oil out of your paint if it's a little too juicy and it doesn't seem to want to work the way you want it to. No, this method is takes a little bit of time, but what you want to do is just take a little bit of this right there, and we'll give it a little bit of time. And just about 15 minutes later, we can see that it's starting to really pull out some of that oil. And so if we take a look at this, it's already a lot thicker than the paint fresh out of our tube. Yeah, this is already, you can feel the difference between this and this. This just feels a lot thicker. So let's take a look at our mediums in the raw form. Here we have the solvent-free gel, the Liquin Impasto, Liquin Fine Detail, and our solvent-free fluid. I'll add a little bit of red paint just so we can kind of get a feel for it with color in it. It should be noted that there's way too much medium to paint ratio on these, so definitely read the directions. I'm using a little excessive amount here just for demonstration purposes so we can see it over a video. So with that caveat in mind, we can still see how the medium really adjusts the paint behavior. Moving on to acrylic mediums, we have the fiber, the heavy body, the fluid matte medium, and the airbrush medium. And again, I'm using a little excessive amount. Again, read the directions. You can get a little bit. You can have a little bit of more play with it in acrylic than you can with oil. That being said, just again read the directions. But here you can again see the importance of how the mediums really adjust the behavior of the paint. So So let's see how these mediums affect the paint. We have transparent and opaque paints, so let's see how it works with those different paint properties. We use thicker mediums, and again, oil on top and acrylic will be on the bottom. Thicker mediums on our left and more fluid mediums on our right. Okay, so let's start with our oil. We're beginning heavy to fluid. We'll have speed this up a bit for brevity. I've already mixed all this stuff up for us so we don't, you're not watching me mix paint. So here you can kind of see how the solvent-free gel, the liquid impasto, how much thicker it is. But you can also just use the oil paint itself to create texture. And you can also use the fluid to make things a lot thinner and more transparent and make it more interesting. Let's move on to the opaque paint. Again, this is King's Blue or Ultramarine plus titanium white, nothing too fancy here. Again, you can kind of really see the interesting characteristics of each medium. We've got a little crazy with that. I'll fix that later. And then this last bit right here. Okay, so let's move on to acrylic. This is our transparent, so we're seeing how thin and thick the medium is. Again, you can just use the paint itself. You don't have to get too carried away with anything. You can also use, but you can really see the value. How the black line and the white line, you can really see how much of you can use glazing or effects with the fluid mediums, or you can create these really interesting impasto thick textures with the heavy body gel or fiber paste, or just using this the paint itself. An interesting observation from this experiment is we can see that the thicker mediums really lend themselves well to opaque paints, and the fluid mediums really lend themselves well to the transparent paints. Makes perfect sense for the intended uses and effects. So again, oil on top and acrylic on bottom. So in this video, I've said don't use thinners, or use it sparingly. Only use your mediums. And now I'm going to show you why. So using this, this goes for oil and acrylic, but for this purpose, I'm going to show you the acrylic version. You're going to use water, a thinner, and airbrush medium, which is very similar in viscosity to our thinner or water. So now I'm just going to take our standard canvas panel, it's already pre-primed and gessoed, and I'm going to take our thinned out pile of paint and our medium pile of paint, and paint out just a squiggly line, a little thick to thin, and let this dry over a few minutes and see what happens. So it's been about 15 minutes. Let's do a wipe test. Let's see what happens with our water versus our airbrush medium. I'll throw a little water on there just to prove just how much more effective at maintaining the integrity of your paint when you use medium instead of thinners.
All right, now let's say we want to do some glazing effects for a painting we're working on. Given all the information we have from these experiments, we can grab our fluid mediums and our transparent paints. But there's a little more nuance involved with glazing than just that. Check out this video on glazing with oil and acrylic paints to see how we can make some really cool and unique effects, like changing a ruby into an emerald.